a lot of medical students don't do that. They don't do a PhD after a medical degree.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Number one, don't settle for mediocrity.
Well, I think unorthodox is something that comes to mind when I think of you 500 plus publications later.
The currency of clinical research is papers. We publish that in the Lancet. We've got medications, drugs, right? The cardiologists are stealing off us. 15 kilograms is a kind of a magic number that if you can get 15 kilograms loss of weight, you can cure the diabetes. I eat once a day.
You once a day?
In the morning, I wake up, I do 100 press-ups, I do 100 straight leg lifts, and I play five-a-side 3 times a week.
With regards to fast cars, has that always been a craze for you? Yeah.
And then he looked at me again, he went, what car do you drive? 0 to 60, 2.5 seconds.
Wow.
Success begets success. Hard work gives you success. And I'm telling you, prayer goes a long way. Poetry in motion, eh?
That felt like a full circle.
Honestly.
So we know you're a huge Manchester United fan. And so what was the jump like from leaving Manchester, beautiful city, vibrant, ever growing, to Qatar, many thousand miles away? Do you miss going to the games as regularly?
So, it's funny you should say that, right? Because, 2013, that was the last time we won the title, right?
Yeah.
Premier League title.
Mm-hmm.
I left. What happened to United?
Oh, no. You know exactly what happened.
So I always say to people, when I come back, inshallah, right? Then we're gonna be back. It's a sad time to be a United fan right now.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And so, do you plan on coming back to the UK at one point?
No.
So that tells me that life in Qatar after you've moved has been something worth staying for. And so, what's it like over there?
Brilliant. Honestly, I mean, why does anybody go halfway across the world, right? I'm comfortable. I'm here. I'm a professor of medicine, Manchester University. I'm a consultant physician at the MRI. Life doesn't get any better, right? And of course, somebody comes knocking, and it happened to be Weill Cornell Medicine, which is an Ivy League university, as you know. And they said, we're going to give you X million, not me personally, but we're going to give you X million for your research fund, right? And you come across here and establish something. And at the time, honestly, it took me about 2 years to decide, right? I didn't do it straight away, but I did do it, and I have no regrets whatsoever. In that, I have a place where they have belief in themselves. So Qatar, as you know, with the World Cup, right? So they believe they can do big things, right? And they invest in that. They don't have short-termism. And I'm not going to be a negative about my neighbors in Qatar, around us, but we know who they are. So they invest heavily and they expect results. And, I think we've achieved that. So I've been there 10 years. And again, in context, when I left, what did my colleagues say when I left? Rayaz, you're making the biggest mistake ever. What are you doing going out into the desert? Now those same colleagues are telling me, amazing, Rayaz, you did such a good thing when you left.
Wow. That's like taking that blind step into the darkness that it's kind of, many people doubt. You may hear a lot of opinions that contradict your own. And so what did it take for you to kind of go, I'm not going to listen to these people. I'm going to do what feels best for myself and take this risk?
Some people say it's kind of an arrogance or belligerence. It's not, right? It's actually belief, right? Belief in yourself that, and it's not an arrogant belief. It's actually belief in yourself that if you work hard and you want something in life, right? And you're willing to work hard for it, you can achieve it. It's possible. Everybody and anybody can do that. I believe that. Of course, you have to have some God-given ability to be able to do it. But to me, there is nothing that we as human beings cannot achieve if we have put the hard work, and then you have to have the environment. I mean, I couldn't say that if I was going to go off to Africa or whatever, right? I would achieve the same, right? But if you have the facilities there and you're willing to put the hard work in, you can do it.
Your route to get to where you are today, for many listeners, myself included, I wonder, how did you get here? It's not something that is, advertised during your journey at medical school or for anyone's journey at medical school. And so what did you do differently? And at what point did you notice that you wanted to go above and beyond and achieve things that not many people can say that they've done?
It's a toughie. But, so even as a student, my friends will tell you, right? So you got to have a passion for something, right? That's the most important thing, right? You can't just do it. I mean, a lot of people I hear nowadays, and I've got daughters who are doctors, and they want the easy way out, right? They want to do minimum amount of work, yet they want huge returns, right? Ain't going to happen, right? So you've got to be able to commit yourself, work hard, right? But you got to have a passion for it, right? I mean, and yeah, I might think, oh my God, diabetes, complications, research, it all sounds really boring, right? But to me, as a medical student, actually, not even before medicine, I was doing anatomy, right? I kind of started research, and it was just the feeling of kind of nobody's thought about this idea, right? And I'm going to produce new knowledge, right? And I'm going to change things, right? And that to me is actually very different from what I always say, the academics as opposed to the ordinary doctors, right? The ordinary doctors might be very good. A cardiologist might be earning a lot more money than me, right? Or might be very good at doing procedures, right? Or an orthopedic surgeon, right? But to me, that's boring. Right? I mean, it's the same old, really. Okay, yeah, you can make it exciting, right? But to me, that was the thing that really, really I enjoyed. And honestly, in life though, you're kind of like things happen and you kind of get pushed. So as a medical student, I actually went to South Africa, right? And I did an elective. This was a long time ago, because partition had just come down, right? And not partition. That's the Indian partition, right? I'm talking about apartheid, right? And I went to this place, and this was a hospital that was on the top of a hill called the Wentworth Hospital, where there's two crazy white guys, right? Who they didn't believe in apartheid. They said anybody who's ill, we will look after them, right? And that's where I went, right? And I worked, but there was a cardiac surgeon called Dave Sharma, madman, right? I spent 6 weeks in my elective, literally. Operating. And before that, I was all set, honestly, to become a cardiac surgeon. This is the kind of, I want to do this. I did that for 6 weeks. I thought, forget this, right? So that actually, bad experience, it was good, but bad, kind of drove me to becoming a physician, right? So then I came to MRI and Manchester Royal Infirmary as a junior. And again, that was a bit of a kind of like, unorthodox way I did it, right? Because at the time, most people would do house job, SHO, and then, kind of progress from there. And I happened to have done, because I'd done research before as an undergrad, I knew somebody who'd just become a senior lecturer in Manchester Royal Infirmary, a guy called Andrew Bolton. You may know him, Professor Andrew Bolton. And he just said to me, Rayaz, do you find it, because he knew I was good at research, we've got this new program of research. Do you want to come down and I'll set it up? And that's how it happened. And then I was, even then at that point, because the professorial department of medicine, which is where I worked, a lot of the bright people used to go into cardiology, right? And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into cardiology. And then, you know what? This is the truth. I was playing football, right? Five-side football. There used to be an inter-hospital league, right? MRI versus the Christie Hospital. And there used to be a guy called Steve Shallett, Professor Steve Shallett, who actually used to be apparently on the books for Tottenham Hotspur a long time ago, right? And I was playing opposite him, right? And I'm a bit of a bully on the pitch, right? Or not a bully, but I can give as good as I get. And I tackled Steve a few times quite hard, but at the end of the game, he actually respected that. He said, you didn't kind of think of me as the professor, right? You kind of, and I was only a junior doctor, right? And we ended up. And he actually shook my hand and he said, I hear you want to do a registrar program. And I was like, yeah. And I thought, he's not, because he was in charge of diabetes endocrinology. And that was it. We shook hands and he said, I'll sort it out for you.
Wow.
Don't tell anybody. Right? But that's how it happened.
Yeah.
And, then I went into diabetes endocrinology. And of course, my research, my passion, that was what's driven me to kind of, become something.
Brilliant. And it was almost like a unexpected cascade of events where you kind of went against the grain. You don't really tackle your senior in a football match that hard, but it kind of branches off to a different message there for me anyway. It's the idea that when we come into medicine, we're often told that you've done the hard part now. You've got into medicine. You just passed the exams and that's it. It's kind of harbored this subculture of settling for mediocrity. And so at Medic Launch, we kind of have this narrative that we want to push and nurture students to create this global impact, to go above and beyond and redefine what were once boundaries. And so what do you think are the necessary experiences or lessons that as medical students in this generation need to know to kind of go above and beyond and not settle for mediocrity?
Number one, don't settle for mediocrity, right? Each one of us, medicine, just getting through medicine, although I probably learnt more real medicine after medical school than I did before medical school, that should be the starting point, right? And, whatever you want, honestly, and we were talking about this earlier with one of my friends, right? That, I grew up in a time when actually there was a glass ceiling, right? For people like me, right? Where we were told, orthopedic surgery, not for you, son, right? That's for somebody else, right? Cardiac surgery, not for you, son. Plastic surgery, not for you, son, right? So all the super kind of, people, and you guys are in a lucky place because actually, you pretty much you can go for it. Okay, it's tough. But then I always say to people, just because it's tough, shouldn't put you off it, right? If you really want it, go for it, right? And then you got to do extra things, right? And not just extra things just to tick boxes that, and I know that's another issue, in the past, honestly, it was all about doing extra things like getting papers, right? That would help you because the guys on the other side of the interview panel would appreciate that, right? They would say, well, this guy's gone above and beyond, right? He's done extra work, right? And he's done it. Nowadays, I know these stupid panels, right? They're kind of like, it's full of educationalists, unfortunately. Not people like, we grew up in an era rather, where there were real professors of medicine, real professors of surgery. There were characters, right? But they were hardworking individuals, right? Who wanted hardworking individuals working for them, right? And that's where you got excellence, right? That's why people fought to get into teaching hospitals, right? Because they were centers of excellence. That's no longer the case. And it's kind of one of the reasons why I wouldn't come back, right? Because, MRI used to be Manchester Royal Infirmary was the place to go because you're going to see, first of all, you're going to see a wide range of really difficult cases, right? And you're going to learn good medicine, right? But then you had individuals who were real professors. They'd worked hard to get to that place, right?
Yeah, interesting. And so just touching upon the aspect of research, 500 plus publications later, how would you sort of in a simple terms, because I'm sure your profound knowledge exceeds what many of us medical students at this moment can even comprehend, how would you advise a medical student to go about the process of research in terms of just even the mindset, how to gather this information, how to get good at it really?
Simple. Research is about asking important questions, asking. And obviously, you've got to be in the environment. You've got to work out, who's doing. And I would say, as a doctor, honestly, doing basic bench research, you know what? There are plenty of scientists with PhDs who are going to do a better job than you, right? If you're going to do research, do clinical research, right? And that doesn't mean audits, right? I mean, that to me is not research. It's about clinical research, right? Like it's about, asking the question, like, so for me, for example, the question was, what causes diabetic neuropathy, right? So nerve damage in patients. We know with diabetes, they lose sensation, they get foot ulcers, they get amputations, right? And it was like, that happens, but what causes it? And I can tell you, as a medical student, honestly, I started some research where we thought it's got to be something to do with blood flow, right? And at that time, it was like heretical to think that, right? It was like, because there are all these scientists with PhDs who were talking about this metabolic theory, right? And I remember going to meetings where we'd done some research, right? And how did we do that research? Well, that was actually, in a simple nutshell, this is what got me interested in, right? So person with diabetes, we know they got nerve damage, right? We believed that they have less blood flow. They're going to have hypoxia, right? So one of my colleagues in Sheffield actually invented a little platinum microelectrode, and we got a neurosurgeon to come and insert that platinum microelectrode into the nerves, into the sural nerve, and measure the oxygen tension level, right? Then we took a little bit of a biopsy, and they sent it to me in Aberdeen, of all places, to look under the microscope to see whether or not what was different in terms of pathology of the microvessels that could explain this low oxygen level. And I honestly, again, it's about where you are, who you, and there just happened to be a guy who was a professor, Tim Mayhew, I remember. He was into placentas, right? And placental changes in placental morphology in high altitude, I think like the Andes or something, right? And he was doing all this research. And I remember I got talking to his rather nice post-PhD student, right?
Yeah.
And she said, oh, we're doing all this. We're looking at capillaries, right? I thought, oh, we've got capillaries in nerves. Can we use the same methods to look at that? And that's how we did it. And then I published my first ever paper, 1989, which was Endoneural microangiopathy causes diabetic neuropathy. Then, because we'd established that, this alterations in structure lead to the reduction in oxygen levels, which lead to neuropathy. When I came to Manchester, MRI, I thought, you know what? We now need to apply this to patients, right? How can we help? And we did the first ever trial in diabetic patients with Andrew Bolton, where we used an ACE inhibitor, right, in patients who were normotensive, but we thought if we give them an ACE inhibitor, it's going to improve blood flow, improve oxygenation. We published that in the Lancet, right? So which is like, whoa. Right. And then that's kind of when people start taking notice of you. And then actually clinical research, the currency of clinical research is papers, not bullshit papers, right? But papers that matter, papers that are going to, change what we do in terms of clinical writing. And, so that's what I worked on for a kind of, a long period of time about, what causes it and how we might treat diabetic neuropathy.
You mentioned currency through research papers. And so can you build upon that a little bit more? Currency into what in particular? What does this kind of allow us access into?
Do a count. That's it. To me, if I again, I'll show you and share with you another interesting anecdote. So when I was a medical student, I went to San Diego, right? And there was actually a professor of pathology, because I'd been doing pathology stuff, and he was a guy, a really good guy, Harry Powell. He's an Irish guy. He was in San Diego, UCSD, and he invited me over because I've been doing kind of similar. He's been doing some research, I think, in rabbits or something, and even though he's a medic, pathologist, and I'd done this human work in the neuromarket. He said, "Oh, Rayaz, you'd come over." So I went over for like visit 4 weeks. Had a great time. Learned how to surf. It was brilliant, right? But and then he said to me, "Go and see your colleague who's an anaesthetist, big pain guy, right?" Yeah. And I remember going to his office, right? And he kind of, he's one of these mad professors, kind of like all these kind of papers up to here, right? And he looked up at me and he went, "What do you want?" And I said, "Oh, Harry's sent me to see you." He said, "Go outside." Like this, literally dismissed me, right? He said, "Come back after 5 minutes." I said, "Oh, okay." So went out and went back, and he was so nice to me. He was like, "Come in, Rayaz, what can we do? We should do some research together, right?" And I was like, "Why?" So I went back to Harry and I said, "Harry, Harry, I know it sounds strange, right? But this guy was like dirt, right?" And then suddenly he was so nice to me. He said, Rayaz, in his Irish accent. He said, you know what he did? He did the PubMed test. You know what the PubMed test is?
Nope.
This works out the bullshitters from the real people who are in clinic or in research. PubMed, PubMed.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, of course you say. But, in those days, PubMed had just come out, right?
Right.
But PubMed is basically, I can put in a search, Jithin, right? What's your surname? Surya, right? If you bullshit me and you're telling me that you've done X, you're such a good guy and you've done lots of research, I do that. Nothing. Or maybe one, maybe 2 papers, right? And that's what he did. This guy, he'd done a search, and at that time as a medical student, I think I'd got 3 papers already. And he said, "Oh, you know what? He's a medical student, but he's worked harder." So that's the currency, right? And that goes actually for research and any funding as well, full stop, right? Because if I want to go to the Medical Research Council, right? Or, I don't know, American Diabetes Association, I'm going to say, I want $1 million, right, to do some research, right? That $1 million is not going to be given easily, right? What they're going to base it on? They're going to base it on, first of all, is he asking an important question, right? is he telling, and you have to tell a story, right? You have to kind of, and I mean, I review grants, right? And the first thing I look at is I do a PubMed search. I see, is this guy, Jithin, am I going to give him $1 million and he's absolutely published nothing? Or am I going to give the next guy who's published 500 papers? Right. Success begets success. Hard work gives you success.
Wow. And so this kind of infers the idea to me that as medical students studying for the 5-6 years that we do, it's good to get started early, especially with research. And so, particularly for my med school, I'm sure for others as well, there's only a limit as to how much choice we get in terms of what we can research. It's sort of algorithm based, and we can put some options in. And so, by chance, we don't get a research paper that particularly interests us or fulfills our curiosity. Is there any way around that?
I mean, there isn't. Honestly, there isn't an extent of, there's a kind of a luck factor. You might do something that's really interesting, right? Or you might be, I mean, you do your homework if you're going to, and I would say, research, if you're serious about it, right, then you need to take a year out. You need to do a BSc or an MRes or something that gives you time to be able to, spend that time, and then you can get something worthwhile out of it. If you're going to just do a 3-4 week project, you're not going to get a paper out of it. Why should I, as a busy, whatever, clinical researcher, little medical student comes up to me and says, and they do it in Cornell now, we've got medical students, Dr. Malik, and they actually demote you in the US because they call you a doctor because they don't like calling you a professor, right? Dr. Malik, can I come and do research with you? But I want a paper after 3 weeks. I said, no, you can't. You need to invest. You want to take time out to spend 6 months with us, and we'll guarantee you a paper. But that's you got to sacrifice. You got to do things.
Yeah.
And so hard work.
Brilliant. And just going back to the idea of global impact as well, you have undertaken an initiative over in Qatar to kind of be at the forefront of clinical research there. And this is a magnanimous project, and it's absolutely huge, and it's making incredible global change, especially in the world of diabetes. From the time that you begun and up to today, what kind of changes have you seen? How has this been exciting for you?
Yeah, I mean, actually, there are two things from a clinical point of view and from a research point of view, right? So from a research point of view, the other thing, after we've done all this hypoxia research, and this was again, purely, I mean, if you hear the story, I'll tell you the story, right? So I'm busy chopping away little bits of nerve, right? I'm doing my PhD with Professor Bolton, and I'm sitting in my office and I'm doing all this, right? And Professor Bolton goes into his clinic and he sees a professor of optometry who's got diabetes, right? Who's from UMIST, used to be UMIST. I don't know if it's still around. This is in Manchester, right? And the guy, I'll think of his name, Nathan Ephron, right? So he says to me, he's thinking inside, he's thinking, I've been bad because he's an academic. He's a big time academic in contact lens research, right? And he's been away on a world tour where he's basically been eating, and his diabetes is out of control. He's put on weight, right? So he's thinking, and Andrew Bolton is a nice guy, right? But can be sometimes a bit tough, right? So Andrew, he comes in, he's thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be in trouble, even though he's a professor, right? And Nathan's a professor. So he said, I'll go in, I'll blind him with science, right? So I'll talk about something called corneal confocal microscopy. Do you know what that is?
No idea.
Yeah, you see, most people don't, right? So he goes in and takes his coat off and he says, Andrew, I'll tell you, what do you know about corneal confocal microscopy? He's an Australian, by the way. Corneal confocal microscopy. And Andrew has now a clue, right? Anyway, they have this little conversation. And then Andrew, because he's been, I don't know, maybe he was embarrassed that he didn't know, but then he comes and he finishes his clinic and he comes, and my office used to be next door to his, right? And he comes in and he walks in, and guess what he says? He says, Rayaz, tell me about corneal confocal microscopy. And I'm thinking, shit, I don't know, right? What's corneal confocal microscopy, right? But there is a God, right? Because that morning I'd read a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, completely left of field, right? But I just read it because it was kind of left of it, about a study that had been done in Italy where they'd taken people with corneal ulcers, not foot ulcers, but corneal ulcers, and they'd given them this new peptide with something called nerve growth factor in it. And normally corneal ulcers don't heal, right? They are very difficult to heal. And these guys within like 2 weeks, they were getting these corneal cells literally to regenerate, right? So I kind of like bullshitted a little bit. I said, "Oh yeah, Andrew, it's really important, right? There's nerve growth factor produced in corneas, right? And it's deficient, and blah de blah." And so that was like, and he said, "Oh, there's this guy who's got this thing called a corneal confocal microscope, which apparently he claims can image nerves in your cornea, right? And he wants to maybe do some research." And we thought, and immediately I was like, nerves in your eye, what they got to do with nerves in your feet? That was my kind of immediate reaction. But then anyway, went to see him, and we decided we're going to do a project, right, where we're going to take diabetic patients, because one of the big issues with diabetic neuropathy is how you measure it, and particularly whether you can measure it very early, right? So, GPs, right? And they think that the monofilament is the best thing, like in terms of sensation. It's absolute, right? Because monofilament is good for people who have got almost complete sensory loss, right? They're advanced stage, right? You're missing a huge, the early phases of disease, right? So we thought, you know what? Maybe this test is imaging these small fibers in the cornea. Maybe it'll pick up early disease, right? So then we actually did a study, right? Where we took patients, healthy control and diabetic patients with different degrees of neuropathy, and we scanned their eyes, right? And again, another story. The study was going really badly, right? Why? Because Andrew Bolter said to me, "Do the study," right? And I was like, okay. So I would see patients on a Thursday morning, actually, in my clinic. The last 2 patients, I would always ask to come with me. To go across from the diabetes center here in the MRI across town to UMIST to have this scan done, right? And, most people are kind of busy, right? They've got to come to the clinic. They've been waiting an hour to see you, and then they're not going to go and do it, right? So then I remember, it's like 3 months into this study, and we've recruited like maybe 4 people, right? And we would see some interesting changes, right? So I'm thinking, what the hell? How do I, accelerate this? And then I remember speaking with my friendly, he actually is a nurse. He used to do take bloods from patients as well, right? Before they came in, or after they'd seen me, right? Called Mike, right? So Mike, I said, "Mike, this study's going really badly, right? We've got to do something, right?" And he looked at me and he went, "Rayaz, what's the problem?" I said, "Patients aren't agreeing, right, to go across town, right, after the..." And then he looked at me again. He went, "What car do you drive?" I was like, and at the time I used to have a Porsche 944 Turbo, right?
Wow.
And he said, "Do you know what all the patients talk about? They talk about that doctor who's got..." Because I used to park it just in front of the diabetes center, not to show off, right? But it just used to be where I used to park. And every single patient used to talk about, "Look at that nice car, Porsche 944 Turbo." And then Mike used to tell them, "Oh yeah, it's Dr. Malik's," right? And so he said, "Simple. You say to them, you'll drive them over from your clinic to UMIST." Honestly, within a month, we'd recruited about 60 patients. Literally. It was like everybody I asked said, "Yes, I'll come across," and I would say, I'll take you across. And that's how we finished the study. So that's that's another kind of, have I gone off tangent there?
Hey, we love to hear
No?
this.
Okay. So that's like, research, clinical research is about, getting things done, right? And, just unorthodox ways.
Unorthodox, for sure. And I feel like that defined you pretty well. Not that we like to define people, but I think unorthodox is something that comes to mind when I think of you. And so, with regards to fast cars, has that always been a craze for you? Yeah.
That's my one. I always say to my wife, you're lucky that it's fast cars that excite me, because I've always had, I've been lucky, alhamdulillah, that my, my mum, God bless her soul, she kind of like, actually when I had done, so I'm not a rich guy, okay? In case you get it wrong, right? I'm working class, humble, normal human being, right? But I did have a Porsche 944 Turbo. She bought me when I was I was a house officer.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. And ever since I've just had this bug, right? And I tell you, right now, I've just got a Ferrari SF90. Do you know what that is?
No.
0 to 60, 2.5 seconds.
Wow.
Right. Top speed 360 kilometers an hour. And if you look it up, it's just the most beautiful car.
I
Anyway,
absolutely will. Yeah.
I digress.
No.
Sorry, I should be serious.
No, definitely not. And so, being someone as young as a SHO with a
Porsche 944 Hotel was
yeah,
great.
yeah. And so, what's it like? This just tells me more as to what kind of person you are, especially at a younger age. Having done medicine at Aberdeen and then going on to do a PhD
In Manchester,
in
yeah.
Manchester.
Yeah.
A lot of medical students don't do that. They don't do a PhD after a medical degree.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Again, you know what? It was a different era when we did it because we had to do an extra degree. And it used to be, a lot of medics used to do MDs, right? They're called MDs. So it was a 2-year degree, research degree, for us to get a number onto a training post, right? That's gone now. Right? And that's why I think the flipping educationalists have torn the heart out of academia, right? I mean, academia used to be a lauded kind of, place that, people used to kind of, and that's why you got the best of the best as professors of medicine, right?
Yeah.
As these were guys who were driven, who were working hard, who were, and now that's no longer the case. So, yeah, I mean, it was different, a different time, different era.
Giving back. That's something that's inherently a part of being a doctor. We give back to society, give back to the children, to the mothers, to the fathers of where we are. And so for you seem to take this to another level. And so I'm reminded of a fascinating story of our founder of Medic Launch, Sajjad. He tells me of a story of how when he got into medicine, you had gifted him an electronic stethoscope. Not even sure if you remember that.
Wow.
But
Okay.
that tells me a lot as to how much this means to you, giving back and helping one another. How does that truly benefit an individual, and how has that changed your life?
You know what? Honestly, I feel God's given me an opportunity to help, right? And that whether it's helping individuals, who want to do something, right? Become a doctor, I will help them, right? And just the very fact that when you're seeing patients, right? I mean, honestly, every time I see it, particularly the elderly, right? Just their gratitude, right, is so good. And I'm telling you, prayer goes a long way. If these people, especially in Qatar, right? They've got, they've got other things. They don't give you free Porsches and Ferraris, by the way. But, their prayers for you, I think goes a long way, honestly. And I can tell you lots of different anecdotes. I'm not going to do it now, but anecdotes of where, I've helped somebody now, and 20 years later, they've actually coming back into my life, and, it's like they've somehow helped, right? So yeah, and I'm in a position to be able to do it. Unfortunately, there are people who make it to that level, and they actually somehow get pleasure out of preventing people from. Honestly, there are people. I've got colleagues, they're like, it's not preventing, but they're not particularly helpful because they think, oh, I've made it. I've made it out of my hard work. Why should I help anybody else? No, you give a helping hand, right? Anybody, and that's why I get into trouble, actually, because medical students come knocking on my bloody door all the time, right? And I never say no. If they want to do research, I help them, right? And we help them try and publish papers, right? Because ultimately, again, it comes back to that currency. What is the currency? Because when especially the medics in Cornell that I've got, right, and they have to get their residency matches, right? And that's one of the major criteria, actually, the Americans use. If you've got papers on top of, obviously, your medical degree from Cornell, it goes a long way.
Wow.
So I'm kind of like, constantly. But, hey ho, if you've been given the opportunity, then,
You've pioneered a huge chunk of research, especially with regards to the future of diabetes and how we can go from it being a chronic ailment that people live with and are often defeated by, to something that we are now in talks of being cured of it. And so what's over the horizon for us? What's exciting?
It's just, what, honestly, it's mind-boggling how my approach, or everybody's approach, and this is going to change now, right? So like a patient had type 2 diabetes, it was a life sentence, right? You were all we were doing as medics, as physicians, is we were giving them medication, which was lowering their glucose to maybe minimize their risk of complications, but they ultimately would get complications, right? And they ultimately would die prematurely. Now, with these new therapies, I mean, I know they're misused as well, but likes of Mounjaro, likes of Ozempic, right? They are transforming the way I look after patients, not just who are overweight, right, but who've got diabetes, right? And if you catch them early enough now, the average type 2 diabetic patient, why have they got type 2 diabetes? Well, mate, it isn't about genetics. It's about being overweight, right? That is a major driving force. In the past, what did we used to do? We used to give them drugs that made them more overweight. And I always say, as a physician, I must be a really good second-hand car salesman, right? Because I was giving them medication that was making them even fatter. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it? But we were controlling the glucose, so we were happy, because we were hitting the target, right? Now, I get to the heart of the problem, which is I make them lose weight. And a lot of these drugs, the likes of Ozempic, you lose 15 kilograms, right? 15 kilograms is actually a kind of a magic number, right? That if you can get 15 kilograms loss of weight, you can cure the diabetes. And now the Mounjaros, you're getting 22, upwards of 30 kilograms. The newer drugs, the triple agonists are going to be they're going to be like 30 plus kilograms, right? So that fundamentally, 90% of people with diabetes, they've got type 2 diabetes, right? 90% of those are overweight. There are 10% who are normal weight and they've got a different variant of diabetes, right? But we can have a major, major impact. Yeah.
And that's so inspiring, and it really drives you as a medical student to be excited about what's coming and what's yet to come.
Well, I tell you, 5 years ago, if you'd asked me what career choice, I kind of, unless you're doing academic, and I was doing academic stuff, diabetes, diabetes on its own was boring. It was a horrible kind of specialty in terms of, I hope my professor isn't listening. But anyway, but it's like, there's nothing new about it. Now, we've got medications, drugs, right? The cardiologists are stealing off us, right? So the GLP-1 agonists, GIP agonists are actually having a major impact in terms of reducing cardiovascular events, reducing complications, right? The cardiologists are now using SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP-1 agonists in their clinics, right? And it's like, hang on, mate, that's my drug, right? But yeah, it's a big change.
With regards to, just going off again about the idea of diabetes and various other chronic comorbidities, especially in the UK, I'm generalizing here, but there seems to be a collective mindset sometimes where we tend to be quite pessimistic. We tend to accept defeat slightly early. And so a diagnosis of diabetes, as you said, was once a lifelong sentence. And so it's changing today. However, on a clinical basis, as doctors, as future doctors, how can we help patients understand that it is now something that we can defeat through collective cooperation, teamwork? And how can we get them on board more?
Simple message. We can do something about it, that we can cure it, right?
Big word.
That's a big word, right? But you've got a belief to be able to say that, right? And I still have colleagues who are dinosaurs, right, who don't want to accept it. Actually, you know why? Because it's almost like I don't know, a perverse pleasure in thinking that these people, their patients, they can look after them for their life, whatever, right? No, I now feel like a surgeon, actually. I can cure somebody, right? I can actually do something. So, and that message has got to change, and it's the same, actually, so going back to my favorite subject, which is neurodegenerative disease, right? So the corneal confocal microscope, actually, we originally used for diabetic neuropathy. But now, when I went to Qatar, again, another long story, but I went to Qatar, I met a neurologist, right? Who was equally frustrated as me in the first 6 months because the guys, the local guys were nice guys, but they kind of felt a bit intimidated. Who's this professor, right? He's coming in, he thinks he's something special. Let's just kind of, slow him down. And anyway, so I met this guy who's a big stroke neurologist, right? From Alberta. And we got talking and he said, look, Rayaz, what about looking at central neurodegenerative diseases, right? With the cornea, because the cornea is pretty near there, right? And I was like, no, don't be daft, right? But we've now done 10 years of research. We're now using corneal confocal microscopy to assess people with dementia, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, schizophrenia, even depression, multiple neurodegenerative diseases that we can now image from the cornea. And actually, the big thing that we've shown is we can actually predict people who are going to get dementia by scanning their cornea, right? And it's just awesome. It's just a great place to be at the moment.
And I can, and I can see that excitement. And has this got anything to do with the sort of contributions or the future contributions of artificial intelligence coming into play?
Big time. Because where AI started? Well, AI originally, the guy who invented AI, right, in 1955, Marvin Minsky in the Mass Institute of Technology, right? Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So this guy was a geek mathematician, right? And he actually did two things. And this is beautiful, right? So he actually was the first person to think about AI and neural networks, right? And how neural networks could be used to kind of, have these computers that are running, right? And they're working out things, right? But he also invented the corneal confocal microscope.
Ah,
Poetry in motion, eh?
that felt like a full circle.
Honestly, it was complete
Yeah.
when I read that. I was like, yes,
Mhm.
right? So AI, as you know, originally was developed actually to look at images. So, they often have these examples of, and they used to use a zebra, I think, an image of a zebra. So you'd get a photo of a zebra and the AI would be used, the computer would look at the zebra and actually create another zebra. Right. This is that kind of if you look at the original slides of AI, and that's what AI is really, really good. I mean, I know ChatGPT is a nice way out for you lot to do any hard work, but and it's actually images is the best for AI is to recognize different kind of conditions, right? And for us, it's a godsend, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because we had all these multiple neurodegenerative diseases, right? Like, say dementia, multiple sclerosis, and all the idiot neurologists don't like the fact that me, a diabetologist, not even an ophthalmologist, is using a technique to work out what's going on in neurodegenerative diseases. Nah, can't have that. So they always used to, every time we kind of publish something on it, they would say, they would ask another question, which would be, kind of a roadblock to try and prevent us, limit us from utilizing this technique, right? And then one question you always used to ask is, yeah, but what if I've got Parkinson's disease, right? You've got neurodegeneration, right? And I've got dementia, I've got neurodegeneration. How can you differentiate the two? Well, guess what? AI, beautiful. AI can differentiate, and we've just shown it just now in a study, with 90% certainty whether what is remaining in terms of the nerves is from a patient with Parkinson's disease or dementia or multiple sclerosis. Wow. So that's going to be like, I need to patent that algorithm. No.
That's a huge game changer.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And so, with regards to the doctors of today, and the doctors of tomorrow, who we are at the moment, how do we lead by example? Because ultimately, if you are a clinician who's going to be advising your patients, encouraging your patients, especially with lifestyle changes, you say that with diabetes, one of the biggest risk factors, which is also a modifiable risk factor, is obesity. How do we lead by example in terms of encapsulating health, well-being? Do you have anything that you particularly practice?
Yeah, I eat once a day.
You eat once a day?
Although earlier on, Saj gave me some sushi and I couldn't say no to that. But I've been doing that for like probably about actually 10 years. So I do two things which my wife thinks I'm mad. In the morning, I wake up, I do 100 press-ups. I do 100 straight leg raises, right? Before I even go and have a shower, right? And then that's my route. I've got to do that. It's almost pathological, right? And then I got into once a day eating. So I just eat one meal a day. And that is actually, as intermittent fasting, right? It's proven that it has multiple metabolic benefits, weight benefits, longevity. There's a paper published just in Nature this 2 months ago. It was actually mice, but they got a whole bunch of mice and they exposed them to intermittent fasting, and they found that they lived about 40% longer than mice that were just eating ad libitum, which is what not you, but a lot of people do, right? And there's this, and it's also a mindset, right? Whenever I tell people I only eat once a day, it's like, but you can't function. You got to have breakfast. You got to have. No, you don't. As human beings, our genetics were set from thousands of years ago, right? And what was that? It's basically, we're hunter-gatherers, right? We used to maybe get lucky if we ate once a day, right? So our metabolism, our genes are set for that kind of, food. And obviously, of course, when you're foraging, you're running around, right? We don't do any of that anymore. So then it's a big surprise when we get fat, overweight, get diabetes, get chronic diseases, So we have got to, we've got to change.
How is this relayed to a patient? You're set up as a patient and we want them, in our best interests to change their lifestyle. How is this communicated? Because often this seems to be the challenge. There seems to be a bit of a wave that I've noticed, especially on social media, where the general population seems to not like the idea of doctors stamping things away as it being, you are overweight and you need to lose weight.
Yeah.
How do we now reach that mutual understanding and allow patients to be better educated about their wellness?
Probably going to say something that's not. I think we've got into a bit of a culture of being a bit too soft, right? Everything will be all right. You just do what you've got a choice. You need to make it. No, if I've got the knowledge and I can help somebody make that choice, then I should be advising them. It's not good to be overweight, right? It's, but the big difference is in the past, I would say, go away and do diet and exercise. And we know that doesn't work, right? It really doesn't work. I got a handful of patients I've seen post-MI probably who've really taken their kind of, life seriously and they've done something right. But now we have the armamentarium, we have the medication that will enable you to switch and prove to that. I often say, the person who's fat, who's overweight, has been on that journey for 50 years, right? They enjoy their food, right? That's just a basic thing that they've got used to, right? And then suddenly I, as a doctor, I'm going to come along, one consultation and say, oh, it's not good for you to be overweight. You need to diet and exercise. They ain't going to do that. But if you can give them something, medication, I know again, people go, oh, no, we can't give them medication. No, give it for 6 months. Prove to them that they can lose weight, right? Effectively, and they feel better, right? Then it's a game changer.
In terms of Manchester United, going back to the beginning, full circle, we love to do this here.
Yeah.
When will the glory days be back? Is it worth you to return and then bring the lucky charm?
Yeah, I think Sir, whatever his name is, needs to kind of bring me back. And no, I mean, again, Manchester United, right? Why are we so bad? Why are we the bottom, 14th in the league? Do you know why? Because we're 14th in probably actually not in terms of how much running our players do, right? I mean, we've got potentially, if you look on paper, we've got potentially really good players, but they're lazy so-and-sos, right? So, again, it comes back to exercise.
Yeah.
They need to do more exercise. And then inshallah, glory days will be back. I'll be back. And between you and me, don't tell anybody, right? I've still got a season ticket.
Oh, brilliant. So it's ready for you. Fantastic.
But so I went to the Bournemouth game. I went to the Newcastle game and we were rubbish. Oh, man.
So with regards to just the topic of football and things like that, how important is it that the youth, not even just the youth, the older generation still retain their ability to engage in physical activity, play sports, indulge in friendlies and just football, everything like that?
Do you think I'm old?
I was literally going to say, how do you sort of...
Do you think I'm old? I know I've got a white beard, right? Alhamdulillah. You know how old I am? Don't get it wrong.
I mean, you look 45.
Good lad, right? 60, right?
Wow.
And I play 5-a-side 3 times a week. I might not play that well, but I do go out and I play with... Actually, the secret to success is play with guys who are about 30 years younger than you, right? Because then you kind of try and keep up with them, right? If you start playing with other 60-year-olds, forget it. It's over, right? But yeah. So I still engage in exercise. I mean, I do that silly thing, which is the press-ups and stuff, but I play... I shouldn't play 3 times a week because the knees will start to give in. Play that. And then I play, I used to play golf actually a little bit, but and I tore my shoulder kind of muscles because I did what as a Pakistani we do well, which is we don't really think that we ought to have coaching. And I just thought, no, I can do this. And I just went for this drive because I'm actually, my hand-eye coordination is pretty good. I was this drive, completely missed the ball and I tore my long-headed biceps, my flipping trapezius. It was just awful. But now I'm okay.
Yeah. You look it. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think this past hour you've given us a lot of knowledge bombs, clinical gems, and just some solid advice on how to develop a mindset that is able to go above and beyond and nurture that innate curiosity that I believe we all have within us somewhere. But yes, no, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It's been brilliant.
Okay. Hey.
There you go.
Thank you.